Most people think you can recognize deep love by the obvious things, the long messages, the constant attention, the compliments, the way she looks at you when everything feels perfect. But real love doesn't always announce itself that loudly. Sometimes it hides in ordinary sentences. A woman can care about you deeply and never say, "I am completely in love with you." Instead, something much more revealing may begin to happen. Her language starts changing. The questions she asks become deeper. The way she talks about the future becomes different. She begins revealing parts of herself she once protected. And sometimes, without even realizing it, she starts using certain phrases that reveal something much more powerful than attraction. Because when feelings become deep enough, love doesn't just change what a woman does. It changes what she feels safe enough to say. And that's what makes these 5 phrases so interesting. None of them is a magical confession. None of them proves love by itself. But when they begin appearing consistently alongside care, effort, vulnerability, and emotional presence, they can reveal that something inside her has moved beyond simple attraction. So listen carefully, because the 5th one may be the phrase that tells you she isn't just enjoying your presence anymore. She may be emotionally building a place for you in her life. And once you understand the difference, you will never hear these words quite the same way again. Love rarely arrives all at once. It usually develops through hundreds of tiny moments that neither person notices while they're happening. A conversation that lasts a little longer than expected, a difficult day when she chooses to tell you instead of pretending she's fine, a private joke that becomes part of your shared language. A moment when she realizes she doesn't have to impress you anymore. A moment when she feels safe enough to disagree with you. And eventually, something changes. The relationship stops being about 2 people trying to make a good impression and starts becoming about 2 people allowing themselves to be known. That's an important distinction. Attraction can make someone curious about you. Infatuation can make someone excited about you. Chemistry can make someone think about you constantly. But emotional attachment creates something different. It creates psychological investment. Your experiences begin to matter to her even when they have nothing to do with her. Your difficult day affects her mood. Your success genuinely makes her happy. Your silence makes her wonder if something is wrong. Your absence becomes noticeable, and your presence begins to feel familiar in a way that is difficult to replace. This doesn't mean every woman expresses love in exactly the same way. People have different personalities, different histories, different communication styles, and different ideas about vulnerability. Some women become more verbal when they fall deeply in love. Others become quieter but more consistent. Some openly express affection. Others reveal it through questions, concern, and the way they slowly allow you into parts of their world. So don't look for one magical sentence. Look for patterns. Look for consistency. Look at what happens around the words. Because anyone can say something beautiful once. The real question is whether her words are connected to behavior. That's where things become interesting. The first phrase is simple. I feel safe with you. Sometimes she may say it directly. Sometimes she'll express the same idea differently. I can be myself around you. I don't have to pretend with you. I can tell you anything. I don't know why, but I feel comfortable telling you things. These sentences may sound ordinary, but emotionally, they can represent a major shift because vulnerability requires perceived safety. Think about what happens when you don't feel safe with someone. You edit yourself. You measure your words. You hide the embarrassing stories. You avoid certain subjects. You present the version of yourself that you believe will be accepted. That's what people often do at the beginning of relationships, not necessarily because they're dishonest, because they're protecting themselves. Everyone has something they don't want rejected, a fear, an insecurity, a mistake, a painful memory, a strange habit, a dream they're afraid sounds unrealistic, a part of themselves they haven't learned how to explain. But when a woman starts deeply trusting you, the walls can gradually come down. She may tell you something she doesn't usually tell people. She may admit when she's scared. She may tell you when she's confused. She may allow you to see her on a day when she doesn't feel attractive, confident, or emotionally strong. And that's important because emotional intimacy isn't simply knowing someone's favorite movie. It's being trusted with the parts of them that aren't carefully packaged. When she says she feels safe with you, she's not necessarily saying everything is perfect. She's saying something more meaningful. I don't feel like I have to perform for you. That's a powerful form of closeness. But here's the distinction you need to understand. A woman saying, I feel safe with you, once doesn't automatically mean she's deeply in love. The real signal is what happens afterward. Does she continue opening up? Does she trust you with difficult conversations? Does she feel comfortable disagreeing with you? Does she remain herself instead of constantly trying to please you? Does she allow the relationship to become more honest? Because safety isn't proven by one sentence. It's built through repeated experiences. And when a woman consistently feels emotionally safe with a man, something else often begins to happen. She starts talking about things she hasn't finished figuring out yet. And that brings us to the second phrase. Can I tell you something? You might have heard those words hundreds of times, but pay attention to what they mean when they come from someone who is becoming emotionally attached. Sometimes the phrase is followed by something completely ordinary. Other times it's followed by something vulnerable, a fear, a personal dream, a difficult experience, a problem she's been carrying quietly, a question about your relationship, or even something she feels embarrassed admitting. The important part isn't the sentence itself, it's the invitation behind it. Can I tell you something? Can really mean, I'm considering letting you into a part of my inner world. And that's different from simply talking. People talk to everyone. But emotional disclosure is selective. We don't reveal our private thoughts equally to every person we meet. We choose, and the deeper the emotional investment becomes, the more likely a person is to want to be understood rather than merely admired. This is where many people misunderstand attraction. They focus on how often someone contacts them, but frequency isn't always intimacy. A person can text you all day and still reveal almost nothing real. Another person may speak to you for 30 minutes and tell you something they've never felt comfortable telling anyone else. The second interaction may carry far more emotional weight. Deep connection isn't measured only by how much communication happens. It's measured by how much of the real person is allowed into that communication. So when a woman repeatedly comes to you with her private thoughts, especially when she doesn't have to, pay attention. Maybe she tells you something that happened at work and explains why it affected her. Maybe she tells you about a childhood memory. Maybe she admits that something you've done made her insecure. Maybe she tells you about a dream she has but is afraid to pursue. Maybe she asks your opinion about something deeply personal. Those moments matter because she's not simply giving you information, she's giving you access. And access is one of the foundations of emotional intimacy. But there's another side to this. If she tells you everything but never cares about your inner world, that may be emotional dependence rather than mutual intimacy. Deep love isn't simply one person opening up. It's two people becoming increasingly curious about each other, which brings us to the third phrase. What do you really think? That question can be incredibly revealing. Because there is a difference between asking for agreement and asking for truth. Someone who only wants approval may ask, do you like this? But someone who genuinely values your perspective may ask, what do you really think? And then actually listen. That's different because real emotional closeness requires the freedom to disagree. In the early stages of attraction, people often want harmony. They want things to feel easy. They don't want to ruin the mood. They don't want to discover incompatibilities. They may even unconsciously present an edited version of themselves because they're afraid honesty could threaten the connection. But mature attachment moves in the opposite direction. It creates enough security for honesty. A woman who deeply values you may eventually stop asking, how can I make him like me? And start asking, can he know the real me? And she may want to know the real you too. That's why a question like, what do you really think, can be more significant than a compliment. A compliment tells you she likes something about you. Curiosity tells you she wants to understand you, and understanding is much closer to intimacy. Imagine you're talking about something you disagree about. Instead of becoming defensive, she asks, "Okay, but why do you see it that way?" That's curiosity. Maybe she challenges your opinion. Maybe you challenge hers, but neither of you immediately treats disagreement as rejection. That is a healthier form of closeness, because love isn't the absence of differences. It's the ability to remain connected while differences exist. And this is where attraction and attachment begin to separate. Infatuation often wants an idealized version of someone. Deep emotional connection eventually wants the complicated version, the real version, the person who has opinions, the person who sometimes gets things wrong, the person who has fears and contradictions. The person who isn't always easy to understand. If she wants your honest opinion, even when she knows you might disagree with her, she's communicating something important. Your mind matters to her, not just your attention, not just your affection, you. And that brings us to the fourth phrase. I was thinking about you. Again, this sounds simple, almost too simple, but context matters. Because there is a major difference between thinking about someone because you're bored and thinking about someone because they have become psychologically connected to your everyday life. Maybe she sees something that reminds her of you. Maybe she hears a song and immediately thinks of a conversation you had. Maybe she passes a restaurant and remembers something funny that happened between you. Maybe something happens during her day and you're one of the first people she wants to tell. Those moments reveal something fascinating. You have begun to occupy mental space even when you're not physically present. And that can be one of the quieter signs of emotional attachment. Think about your own life. The people who matter most don't disappear from your mind the moment they leave the room. Their presence continues psychologically. You encounter something and think of them. You experience something and want to tell them. You make a decision and wonder what they would say. That's not necessarily romantic love by itself. But when it happens alongside emotional intimacy, trust, care, and consistency, it can become meaningful because deep relationships don't exist only during conversations. They continue between conversations. They become part of the way we interpret everyday life. And here's something important. A woman doesn't have to think about you every second for her feelings to be genuine. That's fantasy, not healthy attachment. Healthy emotional connection still leaves room for individuality. She has her own life, her own goals, her own friendships, her own interests. The sign isn't obsession, it's integration. You become part of her life without becoming her entire life. That distinction matters because genuine love doesn't erase individuality. It creates connection while preserving identity. And sometimes the strongest evidence isn't that she constantly wants your attention. It's that ordinary moments remind her of you naturally. She sees something funny and sends it. She remembers a conversation from 3 weeks ago. She tells you about something that happened because she knows you'll understand why it matters. She doesn't need an excuse to connect. You have simply become relevant to her internal world. But there's still one phrase that goes deeper. And this one may reveal something about the future rather than just the present. The phrase is, how would you feel if we noticed the word we? Not necessarily marriage. Not necessarily a dramatic commitment. It could be something incredibly small. How would you feel if we traveled somewhere together? What if we tried this place next month? Do you think we'd ever live somewhere like that? What would you want our weekends to look like? Would you ever want to do this with me? These aren't promises, and they shouldn't automatically be interpreted as one, but they can reveal something psychologically important. She's beginning to imagine you inside future scenarios. And imagination is often where emotional investment begins to become visible. Before people build a future together, they often mentally rehearse the possibility of one. They imagine what it might feel like, what life might look like, how the other person fits into their plans. And sometimes the first evidence isn't a serious conversation. It's a casual sentence. We should do that someday. It sounds harmless, but repeated future-oriented language can reveal that you're no longer being viewed only through the lens of today. You're beginning to exist in tomorrow. And that's where the story becomes deeper. Because a woman can be attracted to you without imagining a future with you. She can enjoy your company. She can feel chemistry. She can have strong feelings. But deep emotional attachment often creates a desire for continuity. Not necessarily a perfect future, not necessarily a predetermined future, just a desire for there to be a next chapter. And that is why the word we can matter so much, because psychologically, language can sometimes reflect how people are organizing their lives. I is individual. You is separate. We suggests connection, but don't turn this into a test. One we doesn't prove anything. The important question is whether the relationship increasingly contains a genuine sense of partnership. Does she consider your feelings? Does she include you in decisions? Does she make space for you? Does she talk about things you might experience together? Does she behave as though your presence matters beyond the immediate moment? That's the pattern. And now we reach the part almost nobody talks about. The deepest sign of love may not be what she says when everything is going well. It may be what she says when the relationship becomes difficult, because anyone can be affectionate during easy moments. Anyone can say beautiful things when they're happy. The deeper question is what happens when she's frustrated, when she's disappointed, when she's afraid, when the relationship doesn't feel effortless. Does she disappear? Does she punish you with silence? Does she immediately threaten to leave? Or does she eventually say something like, I don't want us to become strangers. I want us to figure this out. Can we talk about what happened? I don't want to lose what we have. Those phrases reveal something completely different. They reveal investment in repair, and repair is one of the most important parts of any lasting relationship. Because healthy love isn't defined by never having conflict. It's defined partly by what two people do after conflict. A woman who deeply cares about the relationship may not always handle conflict perfectly. She may become emotional. She may need space. She may say something she later regrets. She's human. But when the emotional storm passes, there may be a desire to reconnect, to understand, to repair, to make the relationship stronger rather than simply win the argument. That's a major distinction, because attachment isn't just about wanting someone when they're easy to love. It's also about caring what happens to the bond when things become difficult. And this is where all 5 phrases begin to connect. I feel safe with you. Can I tell you something? What do you really think? I was thinking about you. How would you feel if we... Different sentences, different situations. But underneath them is one common movement. She is allowing you further inside her world. Safety allows vulnerability. Vulnerability creates intimacy. Intimacy creates curiosity. Curiosity creates understanding. Understanding creates emotional investment. And emotional investment can create a desire for continuity. That's the deeper pattern. It's not about memorizing 5 phrases and waiting for a woman to say them. It's about recognizing what those phrases can represent when they appear naturally, because words without behavior are easy. Consistency is harder. Anyone can say, I care about you, but do they show up? Anyone can say, you can tell me anything, but what happens when you actually tell them something difficult? Anyone can say, I want your opinion, but can they handle an answer they don't like? Anyone can say, I was thinking about you, but are they present when you actually need them? Anyone can talk about the future, but do their actions create a relationship worth building a future around? That's why patterns matter more than isolated sentences. A single phrase is a clue. A consistent pattern is information. And a consistent pattern combined with care, respect, trust, vulnerability, and effort can tell you much more about the emotional health of a relationship. So if you're listening to this and thinking about a particular woman in your life, don't rush to label her feelings. Instead, ask yourself better questions. Does she seem emotionally safe around you? Does she reveal parts of herself she doesn't reveal to everyone? Does she genuinely care about what you think? Does she naturally include you in her everyday thoughts? Does she imagine experiences with you beyond the immediate moment? And perhaps most importantly, does her behavior match her words? because that's where emotional intelligence comes in. You don't need to decode every text. You don't need to analyze every emoji. You don't need to spend hours wondering what one sentence meant. Look at the larger pattern. Is there consistency? Is there respect? Is there emotional reciprocity? Is there genuine effort? Is there room for both people to be themselves? Because deep love shouldn't make you feel like a detective every day. It should gradually create greater clarity, not perfect certainty, but clarity. And there's another truth worth remembering. Sometimes a woman can love you deeply and still struggle to express it. Maybe she wasn't raised in a family where emotions were discussed openly. Maybe vulnerability was discouraged. Maybe she learned to protect herself. Maybe she has been hurt before. Maybe she simply communicates affection differently. That doesn't automatically mean she doesn't care. Some people have strong feelings but weak emotional vocabulary. They may struggle to say what they feel, but their behavior can still communicate it. That's why you should never judge someone's emotional world from a single sentence. Look at the whole person, look at the pattern, and especially look at whether the relationship is becoming more open over time or more closed. There's a difference between someone who is slowly learning how to love openly and someone who consistently keeps you at a distance while asking you to survive on occasional affection. Time reveals that difference, not promises. Not potential, not fantasy. Time, because a person can perform affection for a few days. They can even perform it for a few weeks. But sustained emotional behavior becomes much harder to fake. Eventually, the pattern tells the truth. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. Deep love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's hidden inside the sentence. I feel safe with you. Sometimes it's inside. Can I tell you something? Sometimes it's the question. What do you really think? Sometimes it's the unexpected message. I was thinking about you. And sometimes it's the quiet, future-oriented question. How would you feel if we did this together? But none of these words should be treated like a secret code. They are not a guarantee. They are windows, winding into trust, vulnerability, curiosity, attachment, and emotional investment. The real question isn't whether she has said one of these phrases. The real question is, what kind of relationship exists around those words? Because love is not built by sentences alone. It's built by what happens before the sentence and what happens after it. If she says she feels safe with you, does she actually feel safe? If she opens up, do you handle her vulnerability with care? If she asks what you think, does she respect your honesty? If she says she was thinking about you, does she also make meaningful space for you? If she talks about the future, are her actions creating a relationship that can actually support one? That's where words become meaningful. And now I want you to turn the question around. Don't just ask what she is saying. Ask yourself what you are creating. Are you giving her a relationship where honesty feels safe? Are you listening to understand rather than simply waiting for your turn to speak? Are you allowing her to disagree without making her feel punished? Are you showing consistency instead of demanding emotional certainty? Because love is reciprocal. One person can begin the process, but deep intimacy is something two people build. Sometimes the strongest relationship doesn't begin when someone finally says, I love you. Sometimes it begins much earlier, when two people stop performing, when they start telling the truth, when they become curious about each other's inner worlds, when silence becomes comfortable, when difficult conversations become possible, when the future starts appearing naturally in ordinary conversation, and when both people slowly realize, I don't just enjoy having you around. I want to know you. I want to understand you. I want to build something real with you. So if you've been wondering whether a woman may be developing deeper feelings for you, don't obsess over one phrase. Listen to the pattern. Listen to the consistency. Listen to the moments when she doesn't have to say anything at all. Because sometimes the deepest expression of love isn't a dramatic confession. It's the gradual disappearance of the walls. And when someone starts letting you see the parts of them that they once protected from the world, that's when you should pay attention. So here's the question I want you to answer honestly in the comments. Which of these 5 phrases would mean the most to you if someone you loved said it? And which one have you heard in your own relationship? Share your experience, because someone reading your comment may realize they're not alone in what they're feeling. And if this video gave you a new way to understand love, connection, and emotional behavior, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more relationship psychology and emotional insights. Because sometimes the words that sound the simplest are carrying the deepest message. And sometimes love isn't hiding. You're just finally learning how to listen.